My aunt called me yesterday. I let it go to voicemail. She called again this morning. I blocked her number. You know what she wanted? She wanted to reconnect. She wanted to heal our family. She used the word forgiveness 3 times in a 2-minute message. This is the same woman who, 3 years ago, stood in my childhood home, the home my parents built, the home where I grew up, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not really family anyway." My name is Sarah Chin. I'm 32 years old now, and I'm a graphic designer living in Portland. I have a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, a partner who actually loves me, and a life I built entirely by myself. My aunt doesn't know where I live. None of them do. This is the story of how my own family, my aunt, my uncle, and my cousins took everything from me after my parents died. And this is the story of how I took it all back. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm completely over it. Some wounds leave scars. But what I will tell you is this. Justice exists. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes you have to be patient. But it does exist. And oh, was the justice sweet. My parents were immigrants. They came to America from Taiwan in their 20s with almost nothing, and they built a life through sheer determination. Dad worked as an engineer. Mom started as a seamstress and eventually opened her own small alterations business. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. They owned their home outright. They had savings. They had invested carefully. Most importantly, they had me. I was their only child, born when they were in their late 30s. They called me their miracle baby. I was the center of their universe. My dad's older sister, Aunt Linda, had come to America 5 years before my parents. She married Uncle Robert, and they had 3 kids, Michael, Jessica, and David. The cousins were all older than me, Michael by 8 years, Jessica by 6, and David by 4. Growing up, family gatherings were complicated. Aunt Linda always had this way of making little comments. "Oh, Sarah, you're so quiet. Not like my Jessica. She's so outgoing, so confident." Or, "It's nice that your parents can focus all their attention on just one child. We have to spread ourselves so thin with 3. My mom would smile tightly. My dad would change the subject. The truth was Aunt Linda resented my parents. I didn't understand it as a kid, but I figured it out as I got older. She and Uncle Robert had always struggled financially. Uncle Robert bounced between sales jobs. They rented a small house. Meanwhile, my parents, who had arrived later, had somehow surpassed them. Aunt Linda couldn't stand it. My cousins picked up on their mother's attitude. Michael was the worst, entitled, arrogant, always talking about his big plans that never materialized. He dropped out of college twice and was living in his parents' basement at 26. Jessica was manipulative, sweet to your face, but vicious behind your back. David was the only one who seemed somewhat normal, but he was weak. He went along with whatever his mother and siblings said. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, there was this underlying tension. Aunt Linda would make comments about my parents showing off if they bought something nice. Uncle Robert would hint that since my parents were doing so well, maybe they could help out with Michael's rent, or Jessica's car payment, or David's student loans. My parents helped sometimes. They were generous people. But they also had boundaries, and Aunt Linda hated that. I remember one Christmas, when I was 16. I'd gotten into the University of Washington early admission. I was so proud, and so were my parents. My dad announced it at Christmas dinner. "Sarah got into UW," he said, beaming. "Full academic scholarship." The table went quiet for a moment. Then Aunt Linda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How wonderful. I'm sure it helps that she only had to focus on herself, with no siblings to distract her. My mom's chopsticks clattered against her plate. "Linda, I'm just saying," Aunt Linda continued, her voice light but sharp. "Some of us had to divide our attention. Some of us couldn't obsess over one child's every achievement." Michael snorted. Jessica smirked. David looked uncomfortable. I felt small, insignificant, like my accomplishment was somehow wrong, somehow selfish. My dad stood up. "I think it's time we left." We didn't spend Christmas with them again for 2 years. But my parents believed in family. They believed in trying. So we kept showing up, kept trying to maintain the relationship. I went along with it because I loved my parents and I wanted them to be happy. I just didn't know how much that loyalty would cost me. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The way Aunt Linda's eyes would linger on my mom's jewelry. The way Uncle Robert would ask pointed questions about my dad's investments. The way Michael would joke about inheriting the Chin fortune someday. I should have known. But you never think your own family will turn on you. Not until they do. My parents died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday in October. A semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. They died instantly. They were on their way home from a weekend trip to the coast, something they'd started doing once I'd moved out. Little adventures, just the two of them. I got the call at 11 p.m. I was 29 years old, and in one moment, I became an orphan. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing at the front of the church, numb, going through the motions. Aunt Linda hugged me, and I remember thinking her embrace felt stiff, performative. Uncle Robert patted my shoulder awkwardly. My cousins stood in the back, checking their phones. The first incident happened 3 days after the funeral. I was at my parents' house, trying to sort through things. I couldn't bring myself to pack up their belongings yet, so I was just sitting in my dad's office, surrounded by his books and papers, crying. Aunt Linda let herself in. She still had a key from the times she'd house sat. "Sarah, honey," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We need to talk about the house." I looked up confused. "What about it?" She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap like she was about to deliver difficult news. "Well, your parents wouldn't have wanted you to shoulder this burden alone. This big house, all the maintenance, the property taxes. It's too much for one person." "I haven't decided what I'm doing yet," I said quietly. Of course. She nodded, but her eyes were calculating. "That's why Robert and I were thinking we could buy it from you. Take it off your hands. We'd give you a fair price, and you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Buy it. It's really the best solution," she continued smoothly. "You're young. You have your own life in Portland. Michael was actually thinking he could move in here, maybe start fresh, you know? This house has always been in the family. It should stay in the family." "I am family," I said. She smiled that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you are, honey. I just meant, well, Michael is the oldest grandson. Your father would have wanted." "My father left everything to me," I interrupted, my voice stronger now. "I'm his daughter." Her smile faltered. "Have you actually seen the will?" "Not yet. The lawyer is." "Then you don't know what your father wanted," she said, leaning forward. "Your parents talked to me and Robert about their plans, Sarah. They were worried about you being alone, having to manage everything. They wanted us to help you." It was a lie. I knew it in my bones. My parents had been very clear about their wishes. They told me years ago that everything would go to me, that I'd be taken care of. But Aunt Linda said it with such confidence, such certainty, that for a moment, just a moment, I doubted myself. "I need to talk to the lawyer," I said finally. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Of course. But think about our offer, Sarah. We're family. We want to help you." After she left, I sat in that office for another hour, my hands shaking. The second incident happened at the reading of the will, 2 weeks later. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Patterson, was a kind man in his 60s who had worked with my parents for over a decade. He'd reserved a conference room at his office for the reading. I arrived early. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and all 3 cousins arrived exactly on time, dressed in somber colors, wearing expressions of concern. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began reading. The will was straightforward. Everything, the house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, Mom's business, all of it, went to me. There were small charitable donations specified, but the bulk of the estate was mine. I felt relief wash over me. "See?" I wanted to say. They wanted me to have it. But then I looked at Aunt Linda's face. She was white with rage, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Uncle Robert's face had gone red. Michael was staring at the lawyer like he'd been slapped. "This can't be right," Aunt Linda said, her voice shaking. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Williams," Mr. Patterson said gently. "Your brother and sister-in-law were very clear about their wishes." "They were in their 60s, she snapped. "They weren't thinking clearly. Sarah obviously influenced them, manipulated them." "Mrs. Williams," Mr. Patterson interrupted, his voice firm now. "I drew up this will 8 years ago. Sarah was barely an adult. Your brother was of completely sound mind, and he knew exactly what he wanted." Jessica leaned forward. "But what about us? We're family too. They can't have meant to leave us nothing." "Your aunt and uncle were under no obligation to leave you anything," Mr. Patterson said. "This is their final will and testament, legally binding and witnessed." "This is bullshit," Michael said, loud enough that everyone turned to look at him. "She gets everything? The spoiled only child who barely visited them." "I visited them every month," I said quietly, finding my voice. "I had dinner with them twice a week." "Where were you, Michael?" He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This isn't over. We're going to contest this." "On what grounds?" Mr. Patterson asked. "On the grounds that it's not fair," Michael shouted. Uncle Robert put a hand on his son's arm, but his eyes were on me, cold and calculating. "Let's not make hasty decisions. Sarah, honey, maybe we should talk about this as a family. Your parents wouldn't have wanted us to fight." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, my heart pounding. This is what they wanted. Aunt Linda stood slowly, gathering her purse. When she looked at me, her mask had completely slipped. "You always were a selfish little girl. Your mother spoiled you rotten, and now look at you. Too greedy to share with a family that actually cared about your parents." "You never cared about them," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "You resented them. You resented me. And now you're angry because you can't profit from their death." The silence in that room was deafening. Then Aunt Linda smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "You're going to regret this, Sarah. Family is everything. And you just declared war on yours." They left. All of them. The door slammed behind them, and I sat there shaking, Mr. Patterson looking at me with concern and something like respect. "Are you going to be okay, Miss Chin?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. I should have been more careful after that. I should have been on guard. But I was grieving, exhausted, and I still didn't fully understand what my aunt was capable of. The third incident happened when I went back to my parents' house to start going through their belongings. The locks had been changed. I stood on the front porch, my key not working, confusion turning to panic turning to rage. I called a locksmith, explained the situation. He came out, verified my identity with the deed paperwork I'd brought, and changed the locks again. When I finally got inside, I knew immediately that someone had been there. Drawers were open. My mother's jewelry box was empty. My father's watch collection gone. The safe in the office had been drilled open, and all the documents inside were scattered across the floor. They'd taken photos off the walls. Photo albums were missing. Even some of my childhood things from my old bedroom were gone. My mother's jade bracelet she'd given me for my 16th birthday, a pearl necklace, a gold locket. I called the police. I filed a report. But without proof of who had done it, there wasn't much they could do. And when I called Aunt Linda to confront her, she didn't even have the decency to deny it. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said coolly. "But if someone took things from that house, maybe it's because they had a right to them. Those items were your father's mother's. They should stay in the family." "I am family," I shouted into the phone. "No, Sarah," she said, and her voice was like ice. "You're not. Not really. You're just the daughter of a man who forgot where he came from, who turned his back on his real family for a woman and a child who meant nothing." She hung up. I stood in my parents' violated home, surrounded by the evidence of my aunt's theft, and something inside me broke. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe something inside me finally hardened into steel. The final straw came 6 weeks after my parents died. I'd been trying to settle the estate, following Mr. Patterson's guidance. The house was officially mine now. The accounts had been transferred. I was slowly, painfully going through the process of grieving while managing my parents' affairs. I hadn't heard from Aunt Linda or any of the family since the burglary. Part of me hoped they'd given up, that they'd leave me alone to mourn in peace. I should have known better. I got a letter in the mail, official-looking, from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a lawsuit. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, Michael, Jessica, and David were suing me for elder abuse and undue influence. They claimed I had manipulated my elderly parents into leaving everything to me. They claimed I had isolated my parents from their family. They claimed I had taken advantage of their diminished mental capacity. Every word was a lie. But it didn't matter. They were going to drag me through court, drag my parents' names through the mud, cost me thousands in legal fees, and try to take everything my parents had worked for. I called Mr. Patterson immediately. He reviewed the lawsuit and sighed deeply. "This is a nuisance suit," he said. "They have no grounds. Your parents were competent, the will is ironclad, and we have documentation of everything." But, I prompted. "But it's going to cost you time and money to fight it. That's what they're counting on. They're hoping you'll settle, give them something just to make them go away." "I'm not giving them anything," I said. "Good," Mr. Patterson said. "Because I don't think they deserve a penny. But Sarah, I have to warn you, this could get ugly. They're going to dig into your life, your relationship with your parents, everything. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother's empty jewelry box, my father's stolen watches, the photos ripped from the walls, the cruelty in Aunt Linda's voice when she said I wasn't really family. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared. But I wasn't. Not really. Not for what came next." The depositions were brutal. Aunt Linda's lawyer was aggressive, asking invasive questions about my childhood, my relationship with my parents, my finances. He implied I was a gold digger who had only stayed close to my parents for their money. Michael gave a deposition claiming I had brainwashed my parents against the family. Jessica cried on the stand, talking about how much she'd loved her aunt and uncle, how devastated she was to be cut out of their lives. It was all performance. All lies. But the worst part was the whispers. Aunt Linda had started a campaign. She'd called extended family friends, people from my parents' church. She told everyone her version of the story, that I was a manipulative, greedy daughter who had stolen her parents' fortune and abandoned the family. Some people believed her. I started getting messages. Distant relatives I barely knew, telling me I should be ashamed. Friends of my parents, suggesting maybe I should do the right thing and share the inheritance. I felt like I was drowning. And then, on a particularly bad day when I'd spent 3 hours being grilled by a lawyer who seemed determined to paint me as a villain, I went back to my apartment in Portland and just broke down. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. My partner, Emma, found me there. She'd been supportive through everything, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Sarah," she said gently, sitting down next to me, "you can't keep doing this. It's destroying you." "I can't let them win," I whispered. "I know, but there has to be another way." That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself. I wasn't going to just wait for the legal system to slowly grind through this case. I was going to fight back. I was going to find out everything I could about Aunt Linda and her family. I was going to document every lie, every theft, every manipulation. And I was going to make sure that when this was over, they would regret ever trying to take what my parents had left me. That's when I knew. That's when I realized I wasn't the scared, grieving girl they thought I was. I was my parents' daughter. And I was done being a victim. Should I proceed to phase 3, discovery and planning? Improve, explain. The next morning, I woke up with clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Emma was already up, making coffee, and when she saw my face, she smiled. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I admitted. "I'm done being afraid of them." I called Mr. Patterson and asked him to recommend a private investigator. He gave me a name. David Chun, no relation, he assured me with a slight smile. David was a former police detective who specialized in financial investigations and family disputes. I met him at a coffee shop the next day. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. I told him everything: the burglary, the lawsuit, the stolen items, Aunt Linda's lies. "What do you want me to find?" he asked, taking notes. "Everything," I said. "I want to know who they really are. I want to know if they've done this before. I want evidence that proves they're lying." He nodded slowly. "That kind of investigation takes time and money." "I have both," I said. My parents had left me well provided for. I could afford this. "How long?" "Give me 3 weeks," he said. "I'll see what I can dig up." While I waited for David's report, I started my own investigation. I went through my parents' papers methodically, looking for anything that might help. And that's when I found my father's journals. My dad had been a meticulous record keeper. For 30 years, he'd kept detailed journals, not daily diaries, but financial records, important conversations, significant events. He'd documented everything. I spent 3 days reading through them, and what I found made my blood run cold. My parents had been loaning money to Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert for years. Thousands of dollars. My dad had documented every loan, the date, the amount, the reason, and whether it was ever paid back. None of it had been paid back. Not a single dollar. There were entries dating back 20 years. October 1998, loaned Linda $3,000 for car repairs. She promised to pay back within 6 months. March 2001, loaned Robert $5,000 for business startup. No repayment plan discussed. June 2004, loaned Linda $8,000 for Michael's college tuition. She said she'd pay us back when Robert's commission check came in. It never did. On and on it went. The total came to over $127,000. But that wasn't all. There were also notes about incidents I remembered, and some I didn't. December 2006, Linda asked to borrow Margaret's pearl earrings for a wedding. Never returned them. Margaret too kinda asked for them back. April 2010, found out Robert has been telling people we forced him to borrow money to maintain appearances. Ridiculous. He came to us begging. November 2015, Linda making comments about Sarah again. Margaret upset. I told Linda to stop, but she acts like she's joking.
She's not joking.
She resents us, resents Sarah. I see it clearly now. My father had seen it. He'd known exactly who Aunt Linda was. And he'd documented it all, carefully, methodically, probably knowing that someday, this information might matter. The last entry about Aunt Linda was from 2 months before he died. August 2019, Linda hinted again that we should remember family in our will. Asked directly if we were leaving anything to Michael. I told her our affairs were private. She became angry. I'm worried about what she might do after we're gone. I've told Sarah everything goes to her. I've told Mr. Patterson the same. I want Sarah protected. Linda cannot be trusted. I sat in my father's office, holding his journal, and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of validation, of vindication. My father had known. He'd protected me, even from beyond the grave. 3 weeks later, David Chin called me. "You need to come to my office," he said. "You're going to want to see this in person." I drove to his office in downtown Portland. He had a file folder on his desk, thick, full of papers. When he opened it, I saw photographs, financial records, court documents. "Your aunt and uncle," he said, "have quite a history." He laid it out for me systematically. First, Uncle Robert had filed for bankruptcy 7 years ago. He'd had a failed business venture, a multi-level marketing scheme that collapsed, leaving him with $80,000 in debt. The bankruptcy had discharged most of it, but his credit was destroyed. Second, Michael had 3 outstanding warrants for unpaid traffic tickets and had been evicted from 2 apartments in the last 4 years for non-payment of rent. He'd also defaulted on a car loan. Third, and most damning, Jessica had been arrested 2 years ago for credit card fraud. She'd stolen her roommate's credit card information and racked up $12,000 in charges. She pled guilty to a misdemeanor and done community service, but it was on her record. "They're desperate," David said. Financially desperate. Your parents' estate wasn't just something they wanted. It's something they need. But he wasn't done. I also found this, he said, sliding a photograph across the desk. It was a photo from an estate sale website. My mother's jade bracelet. The one that had been stolen from the house. Jessica was selling it online, listed as vintage jade bracelet, family heirloom. She's stupid enough to use her real name on the account, David said. We can prove she has stolen property. I stared at the photo, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. What else? He showed me more. Items from my parents' house, appearing on various online marketplaces. Michael selling my father's watch collection. Aunt Linda with pearl earrings in a recent Facebook photo, the same ones my father had written about in his journal. They hadn't just stolen from me. They were flaunting it. There's one more thing, David said. He pulled out a document. I found the locksmith receipt. Turns out, your aunt called a locksmith the day after your parents died, before the funeral. She had him change the locks and claimed she was the property owner. The locksmith didn't verify, he just did the job. That's breaking and entering, I said slowly. Technically, yes. And with the stolen property we can prove she took, we have a case for burglary. I looked at all the evidence spread across the desk. Bank records, court documents, online listings, photos, my father's meticulous journals. What do I do with all this? I asked. David smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen justice delayed too many times and was ready to see it served. You go on the offensive. The first thing I did was send a cease and desist letter through Mr. Patterson to every online marketplace where they'd listed stolen items. Within 48 hours, all the listings were taken down, and their accounts were flagged. Jessica called me screaming, "You bitch. That was my property." "No," I said calmly. "It was my mother's property. And I have proof. Keep the items if you want. I've already filed a police report for theft." I'm sure the detectives would love to hear your explanation. She hung up on me. The second thing I did was amend my response to their lawsuit. Mr. Patterson filed a counterclaim for the $127,000 in unpaid loans, plus interest. We included copies of every journal entry, every note, every scrap of evidence that showed the pattern of financial dependence. This is going to humiliate them in court, Mr. Patterson warned me. Are you sure you want to do this? I want everyone to see who they really are, I said. The third thing I did was the most satisfying. I compiled everything, every piece of evidence, every document, every photo, into a comprehensive letter. I sent copies to every person Aunt Linda had contacted with her lies. Every extended family member. Every family friend. Every person who'd sent me judgmental messages. The letter was detailed, factual, and devastating. I included my father's journal entries. I included proof of the unpaid loans. I included screenshots of them selling stolen property. I included the police report for burglary. At the end, I wrote, "My aunt has painted me as a greedy, manipulative daughter who stole from her family. The truth is exactly the opposite. My parents spent decades supporting her family financially and emotionally, asking nothing in return. When they died, my aunt and her family broke into my home, stole irreplaceable family heirlooms, and then sued me for assets they have no legal or moral right to claim. I am sharing this information not for sympathy, but for truth. My parents deserved better than this. Their memory deserves better than this. And I will not allow their legacy to be tarnished by lies." I sent it. Every single copy. I didn't ask permission. I didn't soften the blow. I just told the truth. The response was swift. My phone started ringing within hours. Extended family members, apologizing. Family friends, horrified at what Aunt Linda had done. People I hadn't heard from in years, reaching out to offer support. But the best call came from my father's brother, Uncle James, who lived in California and had been mostly out of touch with the family. He'd always been the black sheep, the one who'd moved away and built his own life. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have warned you about Linda. I should have told you what she was capable of." "What do you mean?" I asked.
He sighed.
She did the same thing to my mother, your grandmother, 20 years ago. Convinced her to change her will, tried to cut me out completely. I had to fight her in court. Your father helped me back then. He testified about Linda's behavior, her manipulation. We won, but barely. After that, Linda and I never spoke again. Why didn't Dad tell me? I asked. He probably wanted to protect you. He probably hoped Linda had changed, that she wouldn't do to you what she tried to do to me. He paused. But people like Linda don't change. They just wait for their next opportunity. Well, I said, feeling that steel in my spine again. She picked the wrong person this time. Uncle James laughed, and it sounded like pride. You're your father's daughter, all right. Listen, I'm coming up for the trial. I want to testify on your behalf. I want to help you bury her case. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. 1 week later, Aunt Linda's lawyer called Mr. Patterson and asked for a settlement conference. They're scared, Mr. Patterson told me. They know they're going to lose, and they know the counterclaim means they could end up owing you money instead of the other way around.
Good, I said.
Let them be scared. We met at a neutral law office. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and their lawyer on one side. Me, Mr. Patterson, and Emma for moral support on the other. Aunt Linda looked older than she had at the funeral. Thinner. There were dark circles under her eyes. Uncle Robert wouldn't meet my gaze. Their lawyer started with pleasantries, talking about family and healing and moving forward. I let him talk. Then Mr. Patterson laid out our position. Our counterclaim is for $127,000 plus interest and legal fees, he said crisply. We have documented evidence of every loan. We're also pursuing criminal charges for the burglary and theft. My client is prepared to go to trial on both the civil and criminal matters. That's not necessary, their lawyer said quickly. We're prepared to drop our lawsuit. That's not enough, I interrupted. I want everything back. Every item that was stolen. The jewelry, the watches, the photos, everything. I want a written apology. And I want the loan repaid. Aunt Linda's lawyer looked at her. She was staring at me with pure hatred in her eyes. We don't have that kind of money, Uncle Robert said finally. Then you'll pay it over time, Mr. Patterson said. We'll set up a payment plan. Miss Chun is willing to be reasonable, far more reasonable than you've been with her. This is ridiculous, Aunt Linda hissed. You're really going to destroy your own family over money? I leaned forward, looking her straight in the eye. You destroyed this family the moment you broke into my parents' house and stole from them. You destroyed it when you lied about them, when you dishonored their memory. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. Your parents would be ashamed of you, she said, her voice venomous. No, I said quietly. They'd be ashamed of you. They were ashamed of you. My father wrote it in his journal. He knew exactly who you were. And so do I. The silence in that room was absolute. Finally, their lawyer cleared his throat. What are your exact terms? Mr. Patterson laid them out. Drop the lawsuit. Return all stolen property within 7 days. Pay $127,000 over 10 years with interest. No contact with Sarah unless she initiates it. And a written statement admitting that the original lawsuit was without merit. If you don't accept these terms, Mr. Patterson added, we go to trial. And I promise you we will win. You'll owe the money anyway, and you'll have criminal records on top of it. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert huddled with their lawyer. I watched them, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. They whispered urgently. The lawyer shook his head. Uncle Robert looked desperate. After 10 minutes, their lawyer turned back to us. We need a few days to consider. No, I said. You have until the end of today. Otherwise, we'll see you in court. Aunt Linda's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Fine, she spat. We agree to your terms. Excellent, Mr. Patterson said, pulling out a pre-drafted settlement agreement. Sign here. And just like that, it was over. The day they had to return the stolen items, I insisted on being there in person. Mr. Patterson advised against it. Let me handle it, he said, but I needed to see this through. I needed to look them in the eye one last time. We met at my parents' house. I'd changed the locks again and had a security system installed. This time they were coming to my door as supplicants, not thieves. I arrived early with Emma. We sat in my father's office, the same room where I'd found his journals, where I'd discovered the truth about everything. "You okay?" Emma asked, squeezing my hand. "I will be," I said. "After today, this is over." They arrived at exactly 2 p.m. I watched through the window as Uncle Robert's car pulled up, Aunt Linda in the passenger seat, Michael driving. Jessica and David followed in a separate car. I opened the door before they could knock. Aunt Linda stood on the porch, holding a cardboard box. Her face was haggard, years older than it had been just months ago. Uncle Robert carried another box. Michael had a shopping bag. Jessica clutched a small velvet pouch. David held a manila envelope. "Come in," I said, my voice neutral. They filed into the living room silently. The room where we'd had so many uncomfortable family dinners, where Aunt Linda had made her cutting remarks, where the tension had always simmered beneath forced smiles. Now there was no pretense. No fake politeness. Just cold, hard reality. "Put everything on the table," I said. They complied. One by one, they set down their boxes and bags. I opened them methodically, checking against the list I'd made. My mother's jade bracelet. Her pearl necklace. The gold locket I'd received for my 16th birthday. My father's watches, 4 of them, though the most valuable one, a vintage Omega, was missing. "Where's the Omega?" I asked, looking at Michael. He shifted uncomfortably. I sold it. Before all this." "To who?" "A pawn shop downtown." "Which one?" He gave me the name. I made a note. "You're buying it back. Whatever it costs. That comes out of your portion of the debt." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. I continued checking. Photo albums, 3 of them. Picture frames. My mother's favorite cookbook with her handwritten notes. A set of jade figurines that had belonged to my grandmother. The pearl earrings from the Facebook photo. Aunt Linda took them off her ears right there in front of me and placed them on the table, her hands shaking. Everything was there. Everything they could return anyway. I stood there, looking at all these pieces of my parents' lives, my life, scattered across the coffee table. Objects that should have stayed in this house, that should never have been touched. Then I looked at them. Really looked at them. Aunt Linda was crying silently, tears running down her face, but her expression wasn't sad. It was bitter, resentful. Even now, even after everything, she thought she was the victim. Uncle Robert looked defeated, staring at the floor. He'd probably known this would end badly, but he'd gone along with it anyway. Weak. He'd always been weak. Michael was angry, his fists clenched at his sides. He was the type who'd never take responsibility, who'd blame everyone else for his problems. Even now, I could see him working up excuses in his mind. Jessica was scared. She kept glancing at the door like she wanted to run. Of everyone, she might have been the only one who truly understood the consequences of what they'd done. David looked sick. He hadn't wanted this. I could see it in his face. But he'd gone along with it because that's what he always did. Took the path of least resistance, followed his family even when they were wrong. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered my mother's empty jewelry box. My father's journal entry about protecting me. The months of grief compounded by betrayal. The lies they'd told about me to people I loved. The pity evaporated. "I want to say something," I said. "And I want you to listen." They looked at me. Aunt Linda opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "No. You don't get to talk. Not yet. You've said enough. Now it's my turn." I took a breath, steadying myself. "My entire life, you made me feel like I was less than. Like I didn't deserve what I had. Like my parents' love for me was somehow wrong, somehow unfair to you. You made me feel guilty for being an only child, for being loved, for being taken care of." Aunt Linda's face twisted. "Sarah." I said, "Don't talk." My voice was sharp, commanding. She fell silent. "You envied my parents for 30 years. You took their money and never paid it back. You took their kindness and repaid it with resentment. And when they died, when I was at my lowest, when I was grieving and broken, you swooped in like vultures to pick over what they'd left behind. You have no idea what it's like to struggle, Aunt Linda burst out, her voice rising. You've had everything handed to you. We've had to fight for everything You chose this. I interrupted, my own voice rising to match hers. Every single problem you have, you created. My father loaned you over $100,000. Did you use it wisely? Did you invest it, save it, use it to build something?
No. You spent it. You wasted it.
And then you blamed him, blamed us, for your failures. That's not fair, Uncle Robert said weakly.
I turned to him.
You filed for bankruptcy because of a failed MLM scheme. You lost money because you made bad decisions, not because my parents didn't help you enough. They helped you too much. They enabled you. I looked at Michael. And you're 37 years old. You've never held down a job for more than a year. You've been evicted, defaulted on loans, and you still think the world owes you something. You thought you deserved my parents' house, a house you barely ever visited, because you're the eldest grandson. As if that means anything. Michael's face was red. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I have all the documentation. Every failed job, every eviction, every warrant.
Did you know that?
I smiled coldly. The private investigator was very thorough. Jessica made a small sound. I turned to her.
And you?
Credit card fraud. You stole from your own roommate. And then you had the audacity to steal from me, from my dead mother, and sell her jewelry online. How did you think that would end? She was crying now, full-on sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I needed the money. I didn't think. You didn't think. None of you did. I looked at David. He was the only one who hadn't said anything. Do you have anything to say? He met my eyes, and I saw shame there. Real shame. I'm sorry, Sarah. Really?
I didn't want any of this.
I tried to tell them to stop, but he trailed off. But you went along with it anyway. He nodded, looking down.
Yeah,
I did. At least he was honest. I turned back to Aunt Linda. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment I'd rehearsed in my mind 100 times. You told me I wasn't really family, I said quietly. Do you remember that? You said it on the phone after you robbed me. She didn't answer, but I saw the recognition in her eyes. You were right, I continued. I'm not your family. Not anymore. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't steal from each other, lie about each other, try to destroy each other. So congratulations, Aunt Linda. You got what you wanted. You're not my family anymore. Your parents would be ashamed of you, she hissed, the same line she'd used before. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile.
No.
They wouldn't. My father wrote about you, did you know that?
For years.
He documented everything, every loan you never repaid, every manipulation, every cruel comment. He knew exactly who you were. And in his last entry about you, 2 months before he died, he wrote that you couldn't be trusted. He wrote that he needed to protect me from you. Aunt Linda's face went white. He knew, I said softly. He knew, and he made sure I'd be protected. He made sure the will was ironclad. He made sure I'd have evidence if I needed it. He protected me, even from beyond the grave. So no, Aunt Linda. My parents wouldn't be ashamed of me. They'd be proud. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the sound of Jessica's muffled sobs, the faint hum of traffic outside. You're going to make your first payment next month, I said, my voice businesslike now. Mr. Patterson will send you the details. You'll pay $1,200 a month for the next 10 years. If you miss a payment, we go back to court and I pursue the criminal charges. Do you understand? Uncle Robert nodded. Aunt Linda said nothing. And one more thing, I added. This is the last time I ever want to see any of you. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my door. Don't send me birthday cards or Christmas cards or try to reconcile in 5 years when you think I've forgotten. This is over. We're done. Permanently. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out of my house. They filed out silently. Michael first, his shoulders hunched. Jessica, still crying. David, who paused at the door and whispered, I really am sorry before leaving. Uncle Robert, not looking at me. Aunt Linda was last. She stopped in the doorway, turning to face me one final time. You'll regret this, she said. Someday, you'll need family, and you'll have no one. I looked at her. This woman who had made my childhood uncomfortable, who had poisoned family gatherings with her resentment, who had tried to steal my inheritance and destroy my parents' memory, and I felt nothing but relief that she was leaving. I have family, I said.
Emma.
My friends. Uncle James. People who actually love me, who don't see me as a bank account or a rival. Real family. Something you wouldn't understand. I closed the door in her face. Through the window, I watched them get in their cars and drive away. I watched until they turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Then I locked the door, set the security alarm, and walked back to where Emma was waiting. She hugged me tight. You okay? Yeah, I said, and I realized it was true. Yeah, I really am. The payments started arriving the next month. $1,200, like clockwork, deposited into an account I'd set up specifically for this purpose. I didn't need the money. My parents had left me well provided for, but it wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. It was about them facing the consequences of their actions every single month for the next decade. The criminal charges were dropped as part of the settlement, but Jessica's online selling accounts remained flagged. Michael had to take out a loan to buy back my father's Omega watch from the pawn shop. It cost him $4,500, more than double what he'd sold it for. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert had to take on second jobs to make the monthly payments. I heard all this through Uncle James, who stayed in touch and occasionally got updates through extended family. He told me I didn't have to listen if I didn't want to, but honestly, I wanted to know. I wanted to know they were paying for what they'd done. Michael lost his apartment again. Uncle James told me 6 months after the settlement. Can't afford the rent with the payments. Good, I said without hesitation. Sarah, Uncle James said gently, I know they hurt you, but don't let this consume you. Don't let them take any more from you than they already have. He was right, of course. And the truth was, I wasn't consumed by it. I thought about them less and less as time went on. The anger faded, replaced by nothing. Indifference. They'd become strangers to me, people I used to know, nothing more. I sold my parents' house 8 months after they died. It was too big for me, too full of memories, both good and painful. I sold it to a young family with 2 kids, and I felt good knowing it would be filled with laughter again, with love. I kept some furniture, some of my parents' belongings. The rest I donated or gave to friends. My mother's jade bracelet I wore every day. My father's journals I kept in a safe deposit box. Everything else, the watches, the jewelry, the photo albums, I integrated into my life in Portland. Emma and I moved into a bigger apartment together. We adopted a dog, a golden retriever we named Machi. I threw myself into my work and found I was more creative than I'd been in years. The grief was still there, but it had transformed into something softer, something I could live with. The extended family reached out, most of them apologetic, some of them tentatively asking if we could rebuild relationships. I was selective. Some people I let back into my life. Others I politely declined. I'd learned the hard way that you can't force family bonds with people who don't value you. Uncle James became a real presence in my life. He visited Portland twice that first year, and we'd have long dinners where he'd tell me stories about my father as a young man, about their childhood in Taiwan, about the dreams my parents had when they first came to America. Your father was so proud of you, he told me once. Every time I talked to him, he'd spend half the conversation bragging about something you'd done. A design project, a promotion, the way you'd decorated your apartment. You were his whole world, Sarah. I cried when he said that. Good tears for once. About a year after the settlement, I got a letter. It was from David, my youngest cousin. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short. Sarah, I know you said not to contact you, And I'm sorry for breaking that boundary. I just wanted you to know that I've moved out. I got my own place, away from my parents and siblings. I'm working 2 jobs and paying my own way. I can't undo what we did to you. I can't take back being part of it. But I want you to know that I see it now, how toxic it all was, how wrong we were. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to be better. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. And I'm sorry. David. I read the letter 3 times. Emma found me in the kitchen, staring at it. What do you think? She asked. I think he's the only one who actually gets it, I said slowly. The only one who took real responsibility. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a long time. Days, actually. Finally, I wrote back. David, thank you for your letter. I appreciate your honesty and your accountability. I'm not ready to have a relationship with you. I may never be. But I respect what you're doing, taking control of your life, getting away from toxicity, working on yourself. That takes courage. I hope therapy helps. I hope you build a good life for yourself, away from all that dysfunction. Take care, Sarah. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it was acknowledgement. It was leaving the door open just a crack, not for him to come back into my life, but for him to know that growth was possible, that change was real. I never heard from him again. And that was okay. The second year after my parents died, the pain was less sharp. I could think about them without crying. I could look at photos and smile instead of breaking down. Emma and I got engaged. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and Uncle James. On what would have been my parents' anniversary, I went to their graves. I brought flowers, peonies for my mother who'd loved them, and a simple bouquet of white lilies for my father. I won, I told them, sitting on the grass between their headstones. I protected what you left me. I protected your legacy. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert are paying back every dollar they owe, and they're doing it for the next 8 years. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. I miss you, I whispered. Every day I miss you. But I'm okay. I'm building a good life. I'm happy. I found someone who loves me. I'm doing work I'm proud of. You'd be proud of me too, I think. I stayed for an hour, just sitting there, feeling close to them in a way I hadn't since they died. When I left, I felt lighter.
Free.
Now, 3 years later, I can tell this story without the anger that used to choke me. I can look back and see it clearly. All the red flags I missed, all the warning signs, all the moments when I should have protected myself better. But I also see the strength I didn't know I had. The resilience. The willingness to fight for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. The monthly payments still come. Like clockwork, $1,200 deposited into the account. I don't spend it. I've been putting it into a scholarship fund, the Margaret and Richard Chin Scholarship for first-generation college students. My parents would have loved that. Using the money that was stolen from their legacy to help kids who remind me of them, who are working hard and dreaming big. Last month, we awarded the first scholarship. $5,000 to a young woman from Vietnam who wants to be an engineer, just like my father was. I met her at the award ceremony, and she reminded me so much of how my parents must have been at that age. Hopeful, determined, a little scared, but brave anyway. That's their real legacy. Not the money, not the house, not the possessions. The belief that you can build something from nothing, that you can overcome obstacles, that kindness matters, but so do boundaries. I'm married now. Emma and I had a small ceremony last spring, with Uncle James walking me down the aisle. I wore my mother's jade bracelet and carried peonies. The wedding was everything my parents would have wanted, full of love, full of laughter, full of people who actually cared about us. Sometimes I think about Aunt Linda. I wonder if she ever realized what she lost. Not the money, she never really had a claim to that anyway. But the relationship. The chance to be part of my life, to know me as an adult, to be there for important moments. She chose greed over love. She chose resentment over family. And now she's paying for it, literally and figuratively. I don't hate her anymore. I don't feel much of anything toward her, honestly. She's just someone I used to know, Someone who taught me an important lesson about who to trust and who to keep at arm's length. The last I heard through Uncle James, Michael is working at a call center and still living with his parents. Jessica got married to someone she met online and moved to another state. I hope it works out for her genuinely. David is apparently doing well, still in therapy, building a life for himself. Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda are still together, still scraping by, still making those monthly payments. And me? I'm thriving. I run my own design studio now. Emma is a social worker helping LGBTQ+ youth. We have Machi and a cat named Dumpling. We just bought a house, smaller than my parents' house was, but it's ours, and it's filled with warmth and peace. I cook using my mother's recipes from her cookbook. I wear her jewelry. I keep my father's journals on my bookshelf. They're with me in every important moment, in every decision I make. If you're reading this or listening to this because you're going through something similar, I want you to know you can survive family betrayal. You can come out the other side stronger. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to walk away from toxic people, even if they're related to you. It's okay to protect yourself and protect what's yours. Blood doesn't automatically make someone family. Love makes someone family. Trust makes someone family. Respect makes someone family. And when those things are gone, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them and act accordingly. My parents protected me even after they were gone. They gave me the tools I needed to fight back. They documented everything because they knew Aunt Linda would try something. They knew I'd need proof. They knew I'd need support. And they were right. So this story isn't really about revenge. It's about justice. It's about standing up for yourself. It's about honoring the people who loved you by protecting what they worked so hard to build. 3 years ago, Aunt Linda told me I'd regret cutting off the family, that I'd need them someday and have no one. She was wrong. I have everything I need. I have love. I have peace. I have a future built on solid ground, not on the dysfunction and toxicity that defined her family. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't dramatic at all. Sometimes, it's just living well, building something beautiful, being happy. That's what I did. That's what I'm doing. And if Aunt Linda ever calls again when that 10-year payment plan finally ends and she thinks maybe we can reconcile, I'll do exactly what I did yesterday when she called. I'll let it go to voicemail. And then I'll delete it without listening and go back to my beautiful, peaceful, family drama-free life. Because I'm done. I won. And I've moved on. That's the real ending. Not the confrontation, not the settlement, not even the justice. The real ending is me, right now, in my kitchen, drinking coffee with my wife, planning our weekend, living the life my parents would have wanted me to live.
Happy. Free.
Surrounded by people who actually love me. That's my revenge. That's my victory. And it's the sweetest victory of all.